Welcome to the Eastman Dental Podcast, where we hope to inspire, motivate and provide education from our guests' experience.
So this week's guest is Emma Riley.
Emma started her career as a dental nurse with Ellis Paul, who many of you will know as the godfather of good posture and four-handed dentistry.
We had to learn how to approach them, sit them down into the bed, support them. No instruments on his side at all. They were all on my side.
From there, she went on to undertake roles in specialist periodontal practices, as well as working in Manchester Dental Hospital. And she then became the only Macmillan oral health practitioner in the country.
And if people see passion, they'll listen to you. You might be wrong in what you're saying, and I have been wrong, but then I want to know why I was wrong and learn from the people, my peers, who will explain to me why I was.
She's the chairperson for the Society of British Dental Nurses and has been involved in the production of numerous guidance documents. Currently, she's working on an exciting project in the Northwest, improving the health of elderly care home residents, as well as working in a number of hospices. Emma, we're extremely excited to speak to you today, and we can't wait to hear your story.
With your hosts, Josh Hudson and Julia Bruin.
Tell us about your early career with Ellis Paul.
Ellis Paul was a fluke, the biggest, bestest fluke in all the world. I left school at 15 and I wanted to be a dental nurse. I'd always wanted to be a dental nurse. I was very lucky with that. Although I was, the career advisor did sort of tell me not to go down that path. And my mum and I just wrote letters of proper letters with a name on the front and a stamp, and we went and posted them, and we found about 10 dentists in Manchester, and Ellis Paul was one of them. And St John Street was, I think it still is the Harley Street of Manchester. So when that came back,
and your mum, of course, was a dental nurse.
My mum was a dental nurse.
So she kind of...
Oh, she knew all about him. The envelope came through and it actually had his name and everything on the envelope, and I can still see it now. It was in a long envelope like this, and my mum was, it's Ellis Paul, and I'm going, who's Ellis Paul? You don't understand, because my mum had worked for Curers and she knew quite a few people in dentistry. She said, he's so well known, Emma. So I said, right, okay. So we went, mum came with me, I'm not embarrassed to say, and we met him, and he said, yeah. And I wanted to go, even back then, I wanted to go on the YTS because I wanted to learn on the job, and I learn better like that. So
isn't that fascinating? Because we're now looking at apprenticeship,
yes,
with dentistry,
yeah,
now, and yeah. I think that, you know, who would have said it 20 years ago that we're going down the educational path of apprenticeship?
I've encouraged both my kids to do that. For me, it's like driving. I wouldn't want to put my daughter in a car if she'd not got any road sense from being in a car with me, looking how you manage a road. I've learned so much by working with him. I could have been academically the bestest dental nurse in the world, passed all the exams. It doesn't make me a good dental nurse. It's understanding people, calling them in, managing people, managing their moods, managing his moods. I'm not saying he was me, but people do. So for me, the YTS worked for me, because I was learning every day, and you couldn't put that in a textbook.
But this is a guy who has shaped four-handed dentistry like nobody else has since, but yet nobody's come on in that scene, but actually we're still using all of his things from all of those years ago. So actually his legacy will carry on.
His legacy will carry on. I mean, you imagine as you know what a dental surgery looks like. So you're 15, you walk in, and it is just a plank of wood like this and it's got a sheet over it, and that's his bed. That is the dental chair. And you're like, well, hang on, shouldn't it go up and down? No, that they lie on that. But what if they have a bad back, Mr. Paul? They lie in bed, he'd say. And he was right. Yeah. So we had to learn how to approach them, sit them down into the bed, support them. No instruments on his side at all. They were all on my side. And we had to know what instruments he wanted. And that sounds, I suppose some people are thinking, it's a bit pretentious and he's just handing his hand. No, but it got me invested in their care, because then I was invested in that patient's journey then. Right, what will he want next? He'll need this, he'll need that. Shade, I had to know what shade he wanted. I had to put the matrix band, he'd have it on. When we were doing etch and bond, I'd be washing the etch off and drying it, not him. He very, very rarely used his 3-in-1. It was the nurse that did that. And he'd have us sat higher up so we could look in, so my posture was better. And I'm trying to do my posture now, because if he was watching me now, he can see my round shoulders. Why did he want us up higher?
Yeah.
Because we could see in the mouth. And if I can't see in the mouth, he didn't want to do the treatment, because it was important that I saw what was going on. But that's not rocket science, is it? That makes complete and utter sense. So I was invested in all of it. And even now, when chair-siding, I've got to have the seat up. In theatre a few years ago, I couldn't see. I got a step, and I'm quite tall. But I said, I need to see what I'm doing. But why? Well, no, I'm part of this team. I'm part of that treatment. So should I not be seeing what's going on? And because I did, I followed the journey through. Oh, he was brilliant. He was absolutely, we did courses. I taught on the courses, went over to Belfast, did the courses with him. And it is so important. As an add-on, my mum has last 5 years had back surgery, spinal surgery, where she's got the titanium pins in her back, and the consultant said it was because of dental nursing. So it is so important. How many of us in the dental profession suffer from our backs? I've got backache. And he saw this 36 years ago. Come on.
That's why visionary. I say pretty groundbreaking for those people who didn't know him.
He was visionary also about involving the dental nurse. He saw the potential of the dental nurse. She was as important part of the team as anybody else, which again, I think we've lost a bit of that as well. So he saw that.
So that sounds really interesting and really insightful, starting your career in that way. But if you were going to describe those early years in
terrifying.
3 words, okay, so terrifying.
Terrifying.
What would your other 2 descriptive words be? Or is it just terrifying with the 3 words?
I can't, because you'll edit this later. It was so long ago, I can still smell the surgery. I can still, the first day walking in, my job initially was going and getting, can I allowed to say, the cigarettes for the other dental nurses, and my job was taking the money to the bank. I was gently brought into it. You cleaned the floors, you cleaned everything out. I probably ended up wearing most of the mixing of the alginate and Improgum. If anybody remembers, Improgum back then was more on my white uniform, which my mother had starched within an inch of its life, so I couldn't move. He used to throw, he'd say, if you sat here, he launched quite a few things at me. But it made me the person I am today, I think. I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And I look back on it with real fond memories, really do. It made me the person I am today. If that's a good thing or a bad thing, I don't know. So he's to blame. Mr. Paul's to blame. I mean, Ellis Paul is phenomenal, but the team around, we forget he's fantastic, but there was a team around it, and I was moulded by these older people who were in there. I'm saying older, they were probably younger than me now, but at 15 walking in, I was a moody. I think they'd probably say I was a moody teenager, but again, they've shaped me to be the person that I am today. But I think he saw in me that I loved mouths, and that sounds really sad. No one, I've got no friends, isn't it? I just love mouths. I'm fascinated by them, and he would start at the beginning and reconstruct this mouth, and that would just be absolutely fantastic for me. And but his vision back then, 36 years ago, was just fantastic, just phenomenal.
So I think we can all see and hear the influence that he's had on you. Somebody else that even at this point seems to be cropping up quite a lot is your mum, and the fact that she was a dental nurse. And I want to bring it back to you saying you always wanted to be a dental nurse. So what's the story there? Is that your mum's influence that you always wanted to be a dental nurse, and how did she play into this early part of your career?
I'd love to tell you that we sat down and had a meaningful chat, and I'm handing over the Yankesucker to you, or I don't know, the dental mirror to you, Emma. But no, she wasn't actually nursing when I was a young child. She worked for Curers in Manchester, and Dr. Curer was. He actually produced the Cure Anchor system, so he was very, very well known. And his sons Hans and Peter, she worked with those. In her later years, she worked with Tony Kravitz, who was quite big. I think he's been the chair of the BDA. I think he's a pivotal role in dentistry as well. But my mum we were fascinated by mouths. It might sound daft, but my nana at 90 kept all her teeth, and that fascinated me, because even back then that was something to behold.
Yeah, definitely.
She insisted on me having braces, and I loved having my braces. I mean, what child enjoys having braces and seeing the teeth moving? Nobody. It's like I say, I was quite alone, and no one had come out for a drink with me or anything. But I was always fascinated by mouths, and even back then, though. You know, you the career officer trying to steer you away from being a dental nurse. That was wrong. You know, I think they had this sort of picture of what a dental nurse could be. And I remember saying, but you can become a hygienist. And this is nothing against hygienists. I just knew I didn't want to do that. I knew I wanted to be a dental nurse, and I just didn't know where that was going to take me. And look where it has taken me.
Which brings us beautifully on to sort of the next question, really, because obviously Ellis Paul was a initial part of your career, but then you went to work in specialist perio practice and then worked in Manchester Dental Hospital. So two, again, very different environments. So talk us through those environments.
You know, when we looked at, you asked me what I'd done, there was a period of time where I seemed to have quite a lot of jobs, and I was flitting from one to another, but I was there for a few years at each one, and I think I was like a sponge trying to sort of find my way. And Philip Green, who again has influenced me, he used to rent rooms from Ellis Paul, and he was a perio guy, a specialist perio guy, and we also had David Cohen, who was doing a specialist endo, and then he asked me to go and work at his perio practice. And perio has this thing of being boring and, it's a bit tedious. No, it's not. It's brilliant.
No, I would agree.
You know,
I don't think it's boring at all.
People would say to me, what do you want to do that for? Oh, you've not, you honestly, it's brilliant. And he's an artist where perio's concerned. He's just brilliant. And we had Maggie Jackson working with us then. And I've been lucky to work with some phenomenal hygienists in my time as well. And Maggie was, and still is. And I really enjoyed my time with Philip Green. And then this job came up at the dental hospital. Now, my mum had worked at the dental hospital, so I thought, why not give that a try? And they were very exciting, interesting times. If any of you've worked within the dental hospital, they were interesting times. That's all I'll say to that. They were fun times, really fun times there. I worked for Pat Heap, was our senior there, and Pat Heap is another lady who was, I think, is a legend for dental nurses in dentistry. But she was scary, Julia. She used to wear a cape, and she'd come through cons with this cape on, and you'd hear it wafting. But she deliberately wore shoes that were silent, and so you couldn't hear her. But I think everywhere needs somebody like that. Yeah. Especially that I'm old school. Like you
said, these people that are in our dental lives stay in our dental souls forever. They don't ever go away. They are deep seated within there, and even if you've had the most terrifying time with them, we've still learnt things from all of them, haven't we?
Yes. Looking back now, she was right. I should have been running through cons singing Robin Hood, riding through the glen. And, that isn't a very good image, and she did pull me up a few times. But I loved my job there. And I learnt loads from students. Yeah. I learnt so much from students. And being a nurse assisting students is interesting. And I think we should all do it. It's terrifying for them as a student to be left with a patient, so that your role changes there, where you're trying to guide them as to what to do. So the dental hospital was a fantastic time, and I'm still in touch with a lot of people they'll probably hear this today, and Andrea, who I know really well, we're still in touch now to this day, and again they've shaped me. But the dental hospital was a fantastic time.
And then, so moving on from there, what was the point that you then kind of pivoted, so to speak, into your role as more of an oral health practitioner and kind of moved away from that environment then?
There was the job was advertised at North Manchester General, and I was quite happy where I was. but I always go with my gut instinct, and I thought maybe it's time. Was I getting too comfortable at the dental hospital? Yes.
Yeah, I think people can resonate with that as well.
And I don't mean that, please don't think I mean it in a derogatory way, but I just needed to sort of move on from that. And the job was going in Max Fax at North Manchester General, and I started there. And probably looking back, that's when my life completely changed. I was there a few years, and I'd got my oral health certificate. And at that time, I think I was the second year to take the oral health back then. I got a merit in it because I did it on implants, which back then implants were, whoa, we've never seen anything quite like this. So that's why I got the merit. It wasn't anything I'd done. It was just something really new. And I'd got this certificate in oral health, and I wasn't using it. And I thought to myself, I should be using this. I've got it. What's the point in, doing all the studying and getting this? And I went to my boss at the time, Jean Taylor, and I said, would it be possible for me to go on the wards? And she said, absolutely. But it'll have to be done in your own time because we can't release you from your hours in Max Fax. So we had a half a day off each week. Mm-hmm. So on an afternoon, I would go on the wards, and in the evenings, I'd go on the wards. And I learned, good God, I learned a lot there. I remember the first day I ever went onto the ward, and I walked on and I looked at this mouth and I went, why is this not being cleaned? Well, I was frog marched off because I wasn't being, I just, in my mind, why wasn't this mouth? What I'd not done was I'd not gone on the ward and asked the sister in charge, could I come on the ward? Am I allowed to come and see this patient? And number two, don't judge them, they were busy. Yeah. And I learned from that day on. And and then it just snowballed from there. And I know I said at the beginning, I've been lucky. I was lucky with my managers. Jean Taylor believed in me. And then I had another lady, Debbie Jones, who said, let's make this a permanent oral health role as an oral health practitioner. And I believe, I could be wrong, because this was 24 years ago. I don't think there was anybody else doing it, but I could be wrong on that. But Pennine, as it was then, Pennine Acute Trust, put me in a role. It was a day a week to do the oral health. And then it just went because they realised it needed doing. So I covered the 4 hospitals within Pennine full time, improving oral care. And it was tough because a lot of nurses were, well, we don't need to be shown how to clean the mouth. But then they did. And it just slowly but surely learned a lot about myself from that. And we improved things from there. And then you
must have been fascinated to hear about the COVID stories.
Yes.
About, the impact of COVID in the mouth and people in intensive care units, then a different treatment pathway created for those people who were ventilated. I mean, that must have been music to your ears to then hear that and think, wow, yes, well, I kind of knew that already. I think a lot of dental people probably thought that, but it was the healthcare provision during COVID times that I think has just made everybody change.
It's turned it on its head.
Yeah.
But 26 years ago, we knew that. Well, I certainly did. It wasn't rocket science to me, as keep the mouth clean. It's affecting the, it'll keep the body clean. It'll help keep, when I say the body and the mind will be okay. And obviously my role was with head and neck cancers, because obviously I was working in Max Fax, so I was looking after them from start to finish of their treatment. But then I started going to the breast Macmillan nurses. They wanted me to see them. The chemo ward wanted me to see them. So that's how then my manager, Julie Hulston, who is probably a hero to me, approached Macmillan and said, well, why?
Yeah, so I mean, that obviously brings us on to talking about your role within the Macmillan charity. Yeah. So talk us through that particular role, what you're involved with there. She
thought, well, hang on, there's Macmillan, and I'm still of this opinion today. There are Macmillan professionals for every field in healthcare, and we approached them and said, can we do? But Emma's doing this job already. By keeping the mouth clean, they're having a better patient journey. Oral mucositis was getting decreased. The levels was grade 2 instead of grade 4 because we were preparing them for the journey and keeping the mouth clean. So she approached Macmillan and they said yes. So I was adopted to be the Macmillan oral health practitioner, and it was the only one of its kind in the UK. And to date, they've not. I don't think anybody else has done it.
So you're going around educating.
I was
What are you doing in that
now?
role?
I'm trying to with the society now. We're trying to get it off the ground again, and I think with what's gone on the last 2 years, we might have a chance now. It's all down to finances and the belief in it. And if I'm also allowed to say that, I think because I now sit between dental and, hospital care, we tend to be a little bit insular within the dental field, where we don't seem to communicate. We think we do, but we don't. And it is difficult. And the mouth gets missed in this. I've got a little old lady currently at 92 in Rochdale, where she's got a tumour in her mouth. The GP wouldn't see her because it's mouths, and the dentist said it's a tumour, so the doctor should be in, and it backwards and forwards. So I think we need to get together and look at the role as sort of a healthcare worker, an oral district nurse. I know what I mean. Somebody who is there not just for their oral care, but to educate. Prevention is 100% the key, and getting out and educating. We mentioned this, we presented at COP26 for the Society on elderly care and oral care, but we need somebody out there promoting it and giving advice to people with head and neck cancers, patients with Alzheimer's, patients with tumours, anywhere in the body. The mouth affects everything. It's a no-brainer to me, and as you know, I'm not really academic, but it's a complete no-brainer. And we're hoping with the society that we can maybe look at getting Macmillan interested again, as to maybe getting dental professionals adopted within Macmillan, because why shouldn't they be? Speech and language are adopted by Macmillan. Dietitians are. We are pivotal in that care, because if they can't eat, they're in hospital, then they get an aspiration pneumonia, then they get, it was so important in the patient's journey. Yeah. But I think we need to accept that and believe that too.
So I think all of that work that you've just talked about kind of brings us on to what Julia mentioned right at the start about this current project that you're doing, looking at oral healthcare for elderly patients, and to make sure that that's improved, and to try and limit the amount of those patients that are going into hospital with issues. Can you tell us a little bit more about that project?
Yeah, within my current role at the moment, I've got a couple of oral health educators who I manage, who now go into, I think there's 42 care homes in Rochdale and the same in Oldham. So they're going in there and promoting oral care and training them on oral care, which is really, really important, because as some listeners will know, CQC is now going in and grading homes on their oral care and their equipment, the training. So, but we started this before that, because we knew that the elderly are a group very, very close to my heart, by the way, who often get missed within these care home environments. Yeah. Hospices, they tend to be looked after quite well, and I work in, I train in 3 hospices up in the northwest. My view is that these care homes are hospices. They are a place where they're their home. Fundamentally, that is their home. That bedroom is their home. But it is a place for them to go towards the end of their life. So for me, that's a hospice.
Yeah.
So they should get the same level of care. So the girls and I, we really promote that within these care homes. I have to say it's challenging, and the care staff are phenomenal, and they've never had any training in oral care. We know how to approach a mouth. We know how to approach a person to do oral care.
And I think people are a bit intimidated by the mouth, aren't they? Yes. I mean, I think, we've certainly touched on it earlier when you were saying about going into wards. I think nurses are quite happy to deal with all sorts of other body secretions, but actually they're not big on dealing with things in the mouth, are they?
They're by their own admission, they don't want to do it. They know it needs doing.
Yeah.
And they are, by the way, they are trying to do it. They are, I'm not saying they're not, but it's one of those that, well, I personally believe it's the most difficult part of the body to clean. I really do. And now you've got patients with Alzheimer's who can be very, very challenging. So we have techniques, the desensitizing technique before we dive in. We train them on that, an approach. But we're guided by them as well, because they know their residents. What we don't go in and is, you need to do this, you need to do that. And often they're edentulous, so a toothbrush isn't what they need. And they don't know the anatomy of the mouth. We're asking them to clean a part of the body that they, and they have to know probably, I would say some experienced dental nurses would have trouble cleaning some of these mouths. They really would. Look at the lady we found the tumour in under a denture. That's complex care now. She's 92. It's a complex person to look after, and yet these care workers have got to deal with that. And also, on my journey, I deal with end of life an awful lot as well, and that's something that there's no courses for that. There's no preparation for sitting with somebody who's passing, and yet the mouth is so important on that journey towards the end as well. So fundamentally what we try to do is make sure whoever does pass has a mouth that can be kissed goodbye, or can smile or can cry if they want to. But I've seen some atrocious mouths. I removed one denture in a home and there was maggots right the way underneath it. And this is 2022. This shouldn't be happening.
So Emma, listening to everything that you've had to say, you're clearly really super passionate about everything that you do. I'm just intrigued as to what motivates you. So you were that person that wanted to go onto the wards and you were told, yeah, you can do it on your day off in your evenings. And you went, yeah, okay, I'll do that on my day off on my evenings. And there was a role that didn't even exist that through the help of your colleagues, you kind of made happen because you thought that it needed to happen. And then you're now working on these projects, helping out the elderly, another area that you think needs the help. And what motivates you to do all of that? What motivates you to push forward and to make change?
Improving patient care, improving the patient journey. And that sounds very X Factor. And but fundamentally that was it.
Yeah.
And wanting to push myself, if that makes sense. You can stay and do what you're doing, but unless you have a go, and I've made mistakes, and I learn every day. Every day you learn something new. But there was a need for it within the hospital, on the wards. So just because somebody else wasn't doing it, and at the time management were, we don't think so, but you can do it in your own time, why not do it in my own time? I was improving the end of life, and that's dead special. I get dead choked when I talk about it, but sitting with somebody passing,
it's a privilege, isn't it?
It's just amazing. It's such a special time, and to be able to be there when they take their last breath. And I'll never. They won't mind me saying there was a patient called Roger, who was my head and neck patient, and I learned so much from Roger and his family. He knew he was passing. He'd had lichen planus that turned nasty, and we operated again, but it turned nasty. And I remember going to his home, and we knew the time. We knew it was imminent. He still wanted his teeth brushing. And it was dead powerful for me, that, because I must have looked at him, and we were very close by this time. We had a bit of banter between us. And I looked at him as if to say, are you sure? And he went, I want to meet him with a clean gob. And a gob, for those who don't know what a gob is, in Manchester is a mouth. And it meant something to him. So even when he was facing his last few hours with us, he wanted his mouth clean. And he also wanted his mouth clean for his grandchildren. He had a big tumour, and it was fungating out of his cheek. But kids are funny, kids are weird. They don't see this, they see Grandad. And they noticed that his mouth was dry. And that was all that was bothering them. Not this tumour, not the fact that it was ravaging Roger, but they saw Grandad's mouth. He needs to clean his mouth. And it meant something to him right to the end. That's so powerful, that is so powerful, that this little area of the body that often gets missed is so important to a human being when he's leaving us. And
well, I think, you talk about that, but, we make this whole big thing about the start of our life, don't we? The birth of a child. And yet we don't necessarily talk about the end bit of our lives. And I think
we're not very good at that. And Dame Saunders, who founded our hospice movement here in the UK, wanted to help us live till we die. But we don't like talking about, we're all going to pass at some point. And the way we care for them at the end is as much, so important. Birth is beautiful. Death can be beautiful if it's handled in the correct way. But again, having seen some mouths, they never forget, the relatives never forget that mouth if it's crusty and it's dry and it's painful. They don't, we still get complaints about that. You weren't cleaning my mum and dad's mouth. It's not that we're not, but as they enter that final stage, the mouth does suffer. So it's sitting them down saying, look, I know it's dry, but it's dry because of ABC. This is what you can do, involving them into the care.
Yeah.
Because, I can go and do it, but isn't it important for them to be involved in that care as well? But the mouth goes on that journey right towards the end. We even clean the mouth, lubricate the mouths of people who've passed. If the coroner's not involved, we can clean the mouth, get it clean, lubricate it for when the parents or the daughters or the sons come in to say goodbye to that person, because they often pass with the mouth open. It's so important, because I can still see my uncle when he died. You can still, and anybody who's lost somebody, you remember that. You remember the mouth, because once a dental nurse, always a dental nurse. You remember that mouth. But even anybody who's lost somebody, the lips are one of the last things you look at, because that's what makes us human, isn't it? I remember cleaning the mouth of somebody who'd passed, and I always get choked when I talk about this. Lubricated the lips, and the mother came in to say goodbye, and she said, "Thank you for doing his mouth." So I said, "No, you're welcome." She said, "I was the first person to kiss those lips. I'm now going to be the last." That's what it means, doesn't it?
Yeah.
That's what it means.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing those stories. I mean, that is, making me go a bit.
But that's not toothbrushing, paste.
No.
It's not fluoride treatment. It's being. That's what makes us human.
It's called real life, I think, isn't it?
It is. I took him to all his ortho appointments. I did this. His hair was, everything was right, but the mouth was what was important to her. And I'm going to kiss him goodbye. And I can kiss him goodbye because his mouth's clean. That's what I'm here for. End of. Sorry, it's gone dead depressing now, hasn't it?
We're going to change the subject completely,
please.
And I think it's, you've said on many occasions during this interview how lucky you feel, because you have found yourself in places and you have got some amazing experiences that you are developing on, and we're getting initiatives in parts of the country which I'm sure will be rolled out nationwide if we're lucky. So those are really great things. How would you motivate a colleague who was perhaps in a bit of a career rut? I mean, after all, this podcast is here to inspire and to educate by experience and do all of those things that we really hope this podcast will do. But what do you think could motivate a colleague in a career rut?
We can all make a difference no matter where we're working, whether we're in general practice, we're on a ward, we are a community dental nurse. Anybody within dentistry, does it have to be a dental nurse? I'm sure dentists get in ruts. I'm sure hygienists gets in ruts, But also, I think it's important that the dental team is the receptionist, is right from the walking in. They can get in a rut, but we make a difference. Dentistry more than ever is in the headlight, is in the news at the moment, and because it's under so much pressure, we've got a job to do. We improve lives, we save lives as well by keeping the mouth clean. Let's not make any bones about this. A clean mouth saves lives. And another thing it does is improve mental health. And mental health is a big thing that the SBDN is involved with at the moment. So every patient is every time you see a patient, it is an opportunity to improve their quality of life. That's all I would be saying. And that goes for everybody within the dental team. And that's all I've tried to do. And that's all I do on a day-to-day basis, is try and improve their journey and improve their life. And the relatives as well. You know, and the dental phobics, if they're coming in, spend time with them. You could go on and on and on. But I think we do get in a rut. What I've done is when I felt I was getting in a rut, I wrote an article for a journal. You know, and dental nurses will go, well, I can't write an article for the journal. Yes, you can. Why can't you? Well, all I am is a dental nurse. Oh, I've had £1 for every time we hear that. You've got experiences. You know, some of these nurses have actually seen patients come in at the age of 2 and 3, right the way through to be married with kids. You know, the experience, we should be harnessing that. You go and write an article, get involved in your practice, get involved in community, reach out to speech and language therapists. They are phenomenal, by the way, speech and language therapists. Get with them, the local dietitian, your local schools. We do focus an awful lot on 0 to 5s, and I think we should do, but there is another group we should be, you know, targeting. Women of a certain age. Menopause is in the news so much at the moment. There's so many initiatives. I'm sorry, I'm rabbiting on, but we should be look for the next goal. Develop yourself. Don't wait for somebody else to do it, please, because you've got to do it. You've got to be the catalyst. And I always thought, if I don't have a go, what have I lost? And I've learned so much. But I must stress, I have been lucky with the people that, you know, I've been surrounded by. But you do make your own luck.
So along those same lines, thinking about all of that, if there was one thing that you could tell everybody to either start doing or stop doing in terms of the dental field, what would you want them to start doing or stop doing?
Broaden your horizon. Don't be so insular. And I'm sure people are shouting at me now saying it's all right, but communicate with the outside world, outside of dentistry. Look beyond dentistry and get sort of liaise with them. Because in my view, we keep ourselves to ourselves. Reach out, because they are all wanting to get involved. You know, your local care home is wanting some advice, but don't just think it stops with that dental surgery or that checkup or whatever. Get your horizon. Give yourself something to do. Please write an article for a journal. We're always looking for people to write articles for journals, studies. I want to hear your experiences. Everyone's got a journey. Everyone's got a life. You know, and people need to hear that. But we are, I think we're insular, but maybe I'm just being... That's just me, but I looked at before I came down here, how many years I've been in this. It's 36 years I've been in this business. Sound like an old singer, don't I? I've been in this business 36 years, and I do think we need to start thinking that the mouth is part of this body that we all live in, and start making plans and making links with other healthcare professionals because they want it. Look at the Macmillan role.
And that's something we can all do.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And it might be in your own time. You know, and I know I stand on the stands with the society. Morale is pretty low at the moment. But haven't we all learned something over the last 2 years? I think it's been like a reboot, really, for us. That's how I say in my job. It has been a reboot. And now's the time, I feel, for dental nurses to stand up and say, right, come on now. They were needed. My colleagues were on wards. They were in intensive care, as you were mentioning before. But, you know, they were going into care homes. They were dealing with hospice at home. They were, taking food to people. We're a fantastic resource. We're the biggest ECP group. Make use of us.
And what do you think your society is particularly doing? Are there any initiatives that you wanted to share with us about what your society is doing?
We're a small society, but a society that I am passionate about. Fiona Elwood is our patron who started this society up. It's education, and education from the student right the way through, but also that dental nurse who's been in practice 30 years, who's quite happy in practice. She needs developing as well, and she needs respecting as well, because that, I often think they get missed. I really do think but without them, no one could practice.
Yeah.
You know, they are so important, and hygienists will know that. A good nurse, a loyal good nurse is worth, blimey, you know, they're so valuable. But for the society, it is about education. We've got some working groups on oral health, mental health. We want people involved. Come and get involved with us. We're trying to get regional groups together. But again, as dental nurses, we can't do it all. They need to meet us halfway.
Yeah.
You know, if you're saying you want a change, you've got to be part of that change.
Yeah,
I can't do it all on my own.
Yes.
I am a gobby Mancunian who's come down here into London today, and I hope you can see my passion for dentistry and oral care. But I need them to meet me halfway, you know, and we can improve things if they meet us halfway. But they've got to help us. But the society is something I'm really passionate about.
Tell us about your volunteer work within the hospice, because I know that you're educating lots of people in that environment and making a colossal difference to many, many patients.
I certainly hope so. We've got 3 really fantastic hospices where I work. Can I mention them? Am I allowed to mention them?
I think absolutely.
Thank
The hospices,
you very much.
I think, are one of the unsung heroes because they're all privately funded, aren't they? You know, that's why we've got to
Thank you very much.
champion their causes.
Yeah, and I will. Spring Hill Hospice, Rochdale, Bury Hospice in Bury, obviously, and Dr. Kershaw's in Oldham. And I'm involved in the early days. Again, with the Pennine role, it was very much within Pennine. So the Macmillan role was working within Pennine. So what I did was I sort of reached out to these hospices because it was really important that they got the same level of support that the ward staff were getting. I should, however, say that the oral care within these 3 hospices is phenomenal. They are bang on because the care, they have a dedicated time to that person. These hospices are just, it's a different atmosphere when you walk into these hospices. Even the staff are different. I just think they're heroes. But it was important that we kept them up to date on changes within oral care because there's different products, there's different techniques. Pink sponges, as you know, were banned.
Yeah.
So we had to sort of look at different ways to clean the mouth. And all 3 hospices embraced it. Adele at Dr. Kershaw's got me in to do many sessions. We've trained all the staff who I trained back in the day. We still do now. I still do now. We do the day centre comes in, so the relatives come in, so we speak to the relatives as well.
And we're lucky enough that, you know, companies out there have now realised that products need to be developed and used.
They do. And
those sorts of things will make a big difference to our patients too.
You know, we need the products. Without the products, we can't. But they have to be used correctly. That is something that I've learned, especially with the hospices are concerned, is that sometimes they've got a side of all these products that people have thrown at them. Use that. They're a bit confused as to what's doing what. Yeah. So what we did was we stripped it right back. You need this, this, and this. What's really important with the hospices is involving the relative if they're lucky to have a loved one with them. But those 3 hospices have just been absolutely brilliant. I'm in there in the next couple of weeks back at Bury Hospice.
So are you educating the care home workers, or are you also doing it a little bit for the loved ones, like you said?
Both.
Right, okay.
Yeah. We open it up to the family members as well. They need to take an oral gel. They need to know how to apply that oral gel. It's not as simple as just rubbing some gel in, or because I don't want them occluding the airway. I don't want them putting too much in. So educating them on the importance of that and the frequency of using the gel. And why am I using a non-foaming toothpaste? Can you go and get me some non-foaming toothpaste? Well, why do I need it? What is a non-foaming toothpaste, Emma? Get them I know I keep using the word invested, but they need to be invested. And also, that relative's going through a pretty tough time as well. You know, we forget that they're watching their loved one pass. So they need support as well. And they don't need me stood there with a toothbrush going, you need to brush the teeth.
But, you know, we're talking about hospice care, but actually we really could be talking about people treating patients in general practice who have got 100%. Diagnosis of 100%. Cancer of all sorts of 100%. Different parts of the body. And we're just talking about end of life here, but actually we could be really talking about our patients generally. And given the statistics around cancer, you know, we're dealing with it every working moment.
And the cancer rates are going to skyrocket now because we've had 2 years of, you know, and that's what's worrying me within the care homes at the moment. But when we say palliative care is years, can be years.
Yes,
people think palliative is, oh, blimey, that's it. It's not. and again, without being depressing, we're all palliative. We're all palliative, right? So I haven't got a crystal ball. So there'll be many people going into a dental surgery who are on palliative therapy. There's end of life care and there's last days of life. Those are the 3 sections that we deal with. So palliative is not this imminent death. So, and I in my head, we all are. So people in practice, professionals in practice, can be managing that too. You know, I see your mouth's a bit dry. I often get told, well, it's only it's teeth, it's dental. No, please, you know, you don't. The last thing they need is a toothache while they're undergoing cancer treatment, and you know, an ill-fitting denture. This lady who I was mentioning, the 92-year-old with the tumour, one thing she wants to do is put her teeth in. She wants to die with her teeth in. So that denture needs adapting. One of the dental practice can do that for me. That's how important they are. They don't think they are, but they are. We're all part of this team.
Small things aren't small, are they?
No.
They're absolutely colossal.
Huge. So my job is to support the actual patient. Fundamentally, the patient is the most important individual, closely followed by that family member, because they're having to watch their loved one pass. And that takes some doing.
So perhaps, you know, if we're getting towards the end of our interview with you, I'd like to perhaps think about the opposite of how we started. So we started by talking about the first early years in your career and using 3 words to describe that. So perhaps we ought to end with 3 words about where you are now in your career.
Hopefully not terrifying still.
Settled.
That's good.
Optimistic. Can I get attractive in there, or is that I'm not allowed to do that? I
think that's a good thing. That goes without saying.
And hopeful for the future. I know that's 4 words. I think there will be a change now, and I believe everything happens for a reason. We've been through a very, very tough time, but with the groups I'm involved with, the Mouth Cancer Foundation, with the society, I feel there is a change coming. So no, I'm very, very settled. Who knows what the future will hold for me, because I'm always looking for the next article to write or the next guidance to write. My big thing now is care homes and involving the the actual managers in the homes writing the guidance.
Talking of that subject of guidance, how do you find working in a big group of people when you're trying to create guidance documents and those sorts of things? Working in a big group of people can sometimes be a bit of a challenge.
It is.
Or are there any things that you?
No, I've seen again,
share with that.
I was part of the UCOMIC group, who, and by the way, I encourage people to have a look at the UCOMIC guidelines for care for cancer patients. I was involved in that, and I was again at the time. I know Josh Harding's involved with it now. I was at the beginning of that. They embraced oral care. They were interested in oral care and they listened to me. But you've got to have that voice to be listened, and you've got to sort of push your way forward. I never thought I was going to set the world alight, and I said I'm not academic, but I hope one thing that comes through with me is my passion for it. That's it. And if people see passion, they'll listen to you. You might be wrong in what you're saying, and I have been wrong, but then I want to know why I was wrong and learn from the people, my peers, who will explain to me why I was, and then we can sit down and look at the guidance. But sometimes in a big group you tend to get lost a little bit, but you've got to be a little bit, hang on, you know. Yeah. And I can get away with it because I'm hands-on doing it. Does that make sense?
Yes.
You can't, and this is why I'm really keen to involve the care managers in the next stage of our training and our guidance. They are there day in and day out. They should be involved in any guidance that we're producing. So, because people see through you. It's all right writing guidance and protocols. If you're not doing it on a day-to-day basis, you know, people will see through that. So I like working in a big team, I should say that. The Macmillan role was on my own, and it was an interesting few years doing that. I learned a lot about myself because I was on my own every day. But then I got to know all the teams in the 4 hospitals, and it was good. I do work better in a team. I love working in a big team, and I love learning. And hopefully I'll carry on learning. Today's been phenomenal for me. You know, I don't like talking about myself.
You've taught us lots of things.
Definitely.
And I I'm sure that the listeners would agree. You have taught us all a great deal.
Well, thanks for having me. And
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We hope you have enjoyed listening to this episode. We would love to hear your suggestions for future guests. Remember to follow us on social media using hashtag the Eastman Dental Podcast. And if you like what you hear, please like, share, subscribe and listen out for future episodes.